I was sipping my morning coffee when the phone buzzed for the third time in less than an hour. The name flashing on the screen made my stomach tighten, even though I already knew what the conversation would be about. Mom. I didn't pick up right away. Instead, I leaned back in my leather chair, my silk blouse whispering against the armrest. The sunlight spilled across my apartment's wide glass windows, catching on the edge of the silver-framed photograph on my desk, a picture of me smiling alone at the Grand Canyon. No parents in sight. No family. Just me and that canyon's endless silence. The phone vibrated again. And again. Finally, I slid my thumb across the screen and put the call on speaker. Her voice came sharp, clipped, like she'd been rehearsing the words all morning. Madison, your father and I have been talking. It's only fair that you give us half of the lottery money. For the family. The words echoed in the quiet of my apartment. For the family. I traced the rim of my mug with one polished nail, my heartbeat steady. This was not a surprise. Not after the way things had unfolded when I first told them the news. I almost laughed at the irony. They thought they were calling a naive little girl, the one they could guilt into anything. What they didn't know was that every time they demanded more, I had already moved another piece on the board. And this time, the game was mine. I still remember the night I found out. It wasn't glamorous. No champagne bottle popping, no cameras flashing. Just me in my small one-bedroom apartment in Phoenix, sitting cross-legged on the floor with takeout cartons spread around. My cat, Daisy, pawed at the crumpled lottery ticket like it was just another scrap of paper. But when the numbers lined up on the TV screen, one by one, impossibly, my hands started to shake so badly, I almost dropped the remote. I'd won $312 million. The silence in that apartment was so loud it roared. I pressed my palms to my face, half laughing, half crying, terrified someone would somehow hear me through the walls. And then came the hardest part, telling my parents. I drove over to their house in Glendale the next morning, still in shock, still clutching that ticket like it was alive. My mom, Carol, was in her robe, sipping instant coffee. My dad, Richard, sat in his recliner, already scrolling through his phone. Mom, Dad, I said, trying to steady my voice. I won the lottery. For a split second, their faces lit up. My mom's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. My dad actually stood up, something he rarely did unless there was food or the game was on. But then, within minutes, their joy curdled into something else. You know what this means, Madison? My dad said, his voice already firm, already transactional. You can finally pay us back for everything. Half of it. That's only fair. It's for the family. For the family, my mom echoed, nodding so quickly it made me dizzy. I stood there, my heart slamming against my ribs. I wanted them to hug me, to tell me how proud they were, to promise that nothing between us would change. Instead, they looked at me like I'd just become a winning scratch-off they were cashing in. I don't know if that's how it works, I whispered, my hands trembling. My dad's jaw tightened. Don't be selfish, Madison. We raised you. You owe us. The words stung like a slap. I felt myself shrinking, 29 years old but suddenly a little girl again, desperate for approval that never seemed to come without a price. That night, I sat alone in my car, parked in front of my dark apartment, the ticket still safe in my purse. My phone buzzed with messages from Mom. Don't forget us. Half, Madison. It's only right. I could still hear my grandmother's voice in my head. She'd passed when I was a teenager, but her words stuck like scripture. Money doesn't change people. It shows who they really are. Protect yourself, sweetheart. And in that moment, I knew she was right. The next morning, before I even deposited the winnings, I hired a lawyer. When I first sat in Mr. Bradley Thompson's office, I felt like a fraud. His law firm's reception smelled of polished mahogany and old money, with framed certificates lining the walls. He was a tall man in his early 50s, salt and pepper hair, crisp navy suit, and a calm smile that carried the weight of decades in litigation and finance. Congratulations, Ms. Lane, he said, sliding the papers toward me. But before we discuss what you can do with this money, We need to talk about what you absolutely shouldn't do. And that was the start of my second education, one far more valuable than the degree I'd gotten years ago. Instead of buying mansions or cars, I let Bradley set up a trust, airtight and ironclad. We funneled the winnings into investments, real estate first. I still remember walking through my first rental property in Scottsdale, the smell of fresh paint and possibility thick in the air. I'd never owned more than a secondhand car before, and now here I was, negotiating with contractors, making spreadsheets, running numbers late into the night. I wasn't a natural at first. I stumbled. I second-guessed myself constantly. I burned dinner because I was glued to an online investing webinar. There were nights when I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, surrounded by financial documents, crying quietly because I didn't think I was smart enough to handle it all. But then small wins began stacking up. The first time a tenant handed me a rent check. The first time a property appreciated more than I expected. The first time my investments generated more money in a month than I used to earn in a year. Each victory lit a fire in me, one I hadn't felt since childhood. Not the fire of chasing my parents' approval, but the fire of finally approving of myself. I didn't flaunt it. I learned quickly to downplay everything around my family. On social media, I kept my updates boring. A picture of Daisy the cat, a coffee cup, a sunset. When my mom would ask, "How are things?" I'd smile and say, "Oh, just getting by." Meanwhile, my life was transforming behind closed doors. I invested in commercial real estate, dipped into stocks, and eventually co-founded a small consulting firm with a woman I met at a financial seminar, Melissa Harris, a former Wall Street analyst who believed in me when I barely believed in myself. She became a mentor, and sometimes when I wavered, she'd grip my shoulders and say, "You're smarter than you think, Madison. Don't let anyone, not even your family, tell you otherwise." Her words stayed with me. By the third year, I wasn't just lucky. I was strategic. My net worth had multiplied. My lawyer's trust structure made sure no one could touch a cent without my signature. But through it all, my parents never stopped calling, never stopped hinting, never stopped saying those three loaded words, "For the family." And every time they said it, I smiled politely, hung up, and quietly added another layer of protection to everything I had built. Because deep down, I knew a day would come when they'd demand more. And when that day came, I was determined not to flinch. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in early spring. The kind of day when the air smells like fresh grass and the world feels deceptively calm. I was in my office, not the little corner desk of my old apartment, but my real office now, 20 floors above downtown Phoenix. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the desert skyline, sunlight bouncing off the glass towers. A piece of abstract art hung on the wall, bold splashes of crimson and gold. On my desk sat a crystal paperweight Melissa had gifted me with one word etched across it: resilient. That was when the text came through. "Mom, we're coming over. We need to talk. It's about the money." I knew exactly what that meant. By the time Carol and Richard walked in, their expressions were already set. Determined. Expectant. They didn't comment on the view or the office decor, though I could see their eyes darting around, taking in the leather chairs, the marble table, the framed contracts on the wall. "So," my father started, lowering himself into the seat across from me, "we've decided it's time you do the right thing. Half, Madison. We're not asking for all of it. Just half. It's for the family." I studied them quietly, fingers steepled in front of me. My mother smoothed her blouse, avoiding my gaze, but her lips twitched with a smile like she was already spending the money in her head. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the city below. Then I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp as glass. "You think I still have $300 million sitting in a checking account?" My dad frowned. "Well, don't you?" I let the silence stretch, savoring the tension. Then I gestured to the folders neatly stacked at my side. "No. I have far more than that. Properties, businesses, investments, things you can't even begin to understand. This isn't just lottery money anymore. It's an empire. My empire." Their eyes widened, confusion giving way to disbelief. You're lying, my mom whispered, her face paling. Am I? I slid one folder across the desk, a glossy portfolio of real estate holdings, skyscrapers, luxury rentals. These are mine. And this. I tapped another folder, thick with documents. This is the company I co-founded. We turned a single lottery win into generational wealth. Wealth you will never control. My father's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. You owe us, Madison. None of this would have happened if not for us. We raised you. The old guilt tried to push its way into my chest, but it couldn't break through anymore. Not after everything I'd built, everything I'd survived. I stood, letting the heels of my shoes click against the polished floor, commanding the room. No. What I owe is to myself. To the nights I stayed awake studying contracts until my eyes burned. To the mornings I cried because I thought I wasn't good enough. To the woman who built this life while you two sat back and planned how to spend money that was never yours. They sat frozen, the silence between us heavy and bitter. Finally, I walked to the window, staring out at the vast Arizona sky before turning back with the smallest of smiles. You wanted half? You'll get nothing. In fact, the only thing I've doubled is my lawyer's fee. So, if you want to take me to court, by all means, go ahead. He'll be twice as motivated to bury you. The color drained from my father's face. My mother's hand shook against her lap. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the little girl begging for their approval. I was the woman holding all the power. And I wasn't letting it go. The silence in that office was almost theatrical, the kind that makes every heartbeat sound like a drum. My parents sat across from me, rigid and stunned, as if the ground had shifted under their feet. For years, they had held the script, guilt, obligation, the endless refrain of for the family. But now I was the one holding the pen. I returned to my seat, folding my hands neatly on the desk. My tone was calm, but each word carried weight. I don't hate you. I don't even resent you, not anymore. But I refuse to be used. If you want to stay in my life, there will be conditions. Their eyes snapped to mine, equal parts disbelief and something dangerously close to fear. Conditions? My father scoffed. Yes. I leaned forward, voice steady. You will stop treating me like a bank account. You will stop hiding behind those 3 little words for the family. If you truly want a family, then act like one. My mom's lips parted, her defenses faltering. I continued, unwavering. Dad, if you want help, you'll go to therapy for that anger you've carried like armor. Mom, you'll stop manipulating me with guilt trips. You both will respect my boundaries. Because if you don't, I will cut you off completely. No calls. No visits. Nothing. They exchanged a glance, a mixture of indignation and panic flashing between them. This isn't about money anymore, I added softly. This is about respect. About healing. About proving that you actually want me in your life, not just my net worth. For the first time, they were speechless. My father stared at the floor, jaw working. My mother blinked back tears, though I wasn't sure if they were from shame or frustration. I didn't let the silence linger too long. I picked up the pen on my desk and tapped it lightly against a folder. And just so you know, I've already doubled Bradley's retainer. If you try to come after me legally, he'll fight harder than either of you can afford. So don't mistake my compassion for weakness. I'm protecting myself now. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother finally whispered, So, what happens if we agree? Then, I said, my voice softening, I'll consider helping. Not with checks or blank sums. With specific things that help you grow. Maybe classes you always wanted to take, or support if you finally pursue your own dreams instead of living off mine. But no more handouts. No more entitlement. The words hung in the air like a contract more binding than any lawyer could draft. I leaned back in my chair, calm and resolute. This is the new reality. If you want to be in my world, you play by my rules. If not, I gestured toward the door, then you walk out and this chapter closes for good. For once, the power wasn't theirs to wield. It was mine. And for the first time in my life, I watched my parents struggle with a choice that had nothing to do with me caving, and everything to do with whether they were willing to change. The weeks after that meeting felt like walking through unfamiliar territory. For once, my phone wasn't buzzing every day with thinly veiled demands or guilt-laden reminders. Instead, there was silence, awkward, heavy, but strangely peaceful. At first, I thought they'd never come around. I half expected my father to storm back in with threats, or my mother to send tearful voicemails about how ungrateful I was. But slowly, almost reluctantly, they shifted. My dad called one afternoon, his voice rough but measured. I looked up that therapy place you mentioned. Might give it a try. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was the closest I'd ever heard from him. A week later, my mom sent me a picture. She was in a community art class, a paintbrush in her hand, colors smudged across her apron. For the first time in years, she looked happy for herself, not just for what she could take from me. Did it heal everything? No. Scars don't vanish overnight. But it was something. It was proof that boundaries, once enforced, could ripple outward like a tide, reshaping the shore. And in the quiet moments, I often found myself holding the small silver locket my grandmother had left me, the one engraved with her initials. I'd kept it tucked in my drawer all these years, but now I wore it openly. Her words echoed every time I clasped it around my neck. Money doesn't change people. It shows who they really are. Protect yourself, sweetheart. She was right. My parents had shown me who they were when the money first appeared. And I had shown myself who I could become when I refused to be broken by it. One evening, standing by the window of my apartment with Daisy curled at my feet, I looked out at the Phoenix skyline glowing in gold and rose. I thought about everything: the fear, the betrayal, the nights I doubted myself, the empire I had quietly built brick by brick. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Not because I had money, but because I finally had power over my own life. I smiled, lifted my glass of wine, and let the final words settle in my mind, words I knew I'd carry with me forever. My parents demanded half my lottery winnings for the family, but I kept my fortune, my freedom, and my self-respect. And that's worth more than any jackpot.